Driving down a desolate highway on a moonless night, surrounded by darkness so thick it seems to swallow the world, is an experience that can make even the most seasoned traveler uneasy. The hum of the engine is the only sound, echoing off the empty road, as fatigue begins to weigh heavy with every passing mile. Just when the feeling of isolation becomes overwhelming, a figure materializes on the roadside, barely visible in the dim glow of the headlights. You offer a ride to this solitary traveler, a gesture of kindness in the stillness of the night. As they settle into the passenger seat, a shiver runs down your spine. There's something peculiar about them, a subtle unease that prickles at the back of your mind. Yet you dismiss it, attributing it to exhaustion and the late hour. The hitchhiker introduces themselves as Jack, a name that seems oddly generic for someone with such an enigmatic presence. Their voice is soft, almost musical, but there's an underlying tension beneath the surface. You try to engage them in conversation, asking about their destination and the reason for their journey, but Jack's answers are vague and evasive. As the journey progresses, Jack's presence becomes increasingly unsettling. Their eyes dart around the interior of the car, as if searching for something that isn't there. You catch glimpses of movement in the corner of your eye, but when you turn to look, there's nothing there. It's as if Jack brings a sense of unreality with them, a distortion of space and time that leaves you feeling disoriented and off balance. You glance at the clock on the dashboard, noting with a sinking feeling that several hours have passed since you picked up Jack. It feels like mere minutes, but the darkness outside tells a different story. You try to shake off the feeling of unease that clings to you like a shroud, focusing instead on the road ahead. Suddenly, without warning, Jack lets out a sharp gasp, their body tensing in the passenger seat. You slam on the brakes, heart pounding in your chest as you scan the darkness for any sign of danger. But there's nothing there, only the empty expanse of the highway stretching out before you. What is it, you ask, your voice trembling with fear? Jack doesn't respond, their eyes fixed on something in the distance. You follow their gaze, but all you see is darkness. And then, as suddenly as it began, the tension in the car dissipates, leaving you feeling bewildered and shaken. You try to resume your journey, but the encounter with Jack has left you on edge. You can't shake the feeling that something is watching you, lurking just beyond the reach of your headlights. Every shadow seems to hold a hidden threat, every gust of wind a whispered warning. As the hours pass, you find yourself growing increasingly paranoid, jumping at the slightest sound and constantly checking the rearview mirror for any sign of pursuit. You tell yourself it's just your imagination, that Jack's strange behavior has infected your thoughts like a virus. But deep down, you know there's something more to it, something you can't explain. You reach a rest stop in the early hours of the morning, grateful for the chance to stretch your legs and clear your head. But as you step out of the car, you're overcome by a sense of foreboding. The rest stop is deserted, the silence oppressive in its intensity. Ignoring the warning bells ringing in your mind, you make your way towards the restrooms, hoping to wash away the feeling of unease that clings to you like a second skin. But as you push open the door and step inside, you're greeted by a sight that freezes you in your tracks. The walls are covered in graffiti, the words and symbols etched into the paint with a crude sense of urgency. You try to make sense of the messages scrawled across the tiles, but they're nothing more than gibberish, a jumble of words and phrases that make your head spin. You stumble backwards, heart pounding in your chest, as you realize that you're not alone. There's someone else in the restroom with you, their presence looming in the darkness like a specter. You try to call out, to demand answers, but your voice catches in your throat, choked off by fear. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the feeling of being watched vanishes, leaving you alone in the empty restroom. You stumble back to your car, heart still racing, as you try to make sense of what just happened. The rest of the journey passes in a blur. The memory of the encounter with Jack and the rest stop haunting your every thought. You arrive at your destination shaken and unsettled, unable to shake the feeling that you've stumbled into something beyond your understanding. It was a crisp autumn evening, and Sarah found herself driving alone on a remote stretch of highway, surrounded by towering trees whose branches seemed to reach out and claw at the sky. The road stretched endlessly before her, illuminated only by the soft glow of her headlights. As she navigated the twists and turns, a sense of unease settled over her like a heavy blanket. Sarah had always enjoyed long drives, finding solace in the rhythmic hum of the engine and the freedom of the open road. But tonight, as the darkness closed in around her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that there was something lurking just beyond the reach of her headlights. She tried to push the thought from her mind, focusing instead on the road ahead. But no matter how hard she tried to distract herself, the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of her consciousness like a persistent itch. Suddenly, Sarah noticed a pair of headlights in her rearview mirror, gaining on her with alarming speed. She tensed, gripping the steering wheel tightly as she tried to shake off the feeling of dread that crept up her spine. But no matter how fast she drove, the headlights remained hot on her tail, casting long shadows that danced along the road. Her heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to maintain control of her car, the engine roaring beneath her as she pushed it to its limits. The wind whipped through her hair, and her knuckles turned white as she clenched the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. But just when she thought she couldn't go on, the headlights disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving Sarah alone in the darkness once more. She slowed to a stop, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a figment of her imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by the loneliness of the road? Or had she stumbled upon something far more sinister, a phantom car chase that defied explanation? Shaken but determined to put the experience behind her, Sarah continued on her journey, the memory of the phantom car chase lingering in the back of her mind like a ghostly echo. And as the miles stretched on, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the shadows themselves held secrets too dark to comprehend. The road seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning through the wilderness like a serpent in the night. Sarah's eyes grew heavy with fatigue, her thoughts drifting as she fought to stay awake. But no matter how hard she tried to focus, the events of the evening continued to replay in her mind, each twist and turn more vivid than the last. Suddenly, Sarah was jolted awake by a loud noise, a sharp bang that echoed through the silence like a gunshot. She slammed on the brakes, her heart pounding in her chest as she scanned the darkness for any sign of danger. But there was nothing, only the empty expanse of the highway stretching out before her. Trembling with fear, Sarah stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady beneath her as she surveyed the scene. The night air was thick with tension, every rustle of the leaves and snap of a twig sending her heart racing. And then, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah spotted movement, a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, its eyes gleaming with malice as it watched her from afar. She froze, her breath catching in her throat as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. But before she could react, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving Sarah alone once more in the darkness. Trembling with fear, she climbed back into her car, and sped away, the memory of the phantom car chase burning bright in her mind. It was a late summer evening when a group of friends embarked on a road trip, eager for adventure and the thrill of the open road. They had packed their bags, fueled up the car, and set off into the night, the promise of excitement hanging in the air. As the miles rolled by and the darkness of night enveloped them, their excitement began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of fatigue and unease. The road stretched endlessly before them, illuminated only by the dim glow of their headlights. The silence inside the car was broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the occasional whispered conversation. After what felt like hours of driving, they spotted a sign for a rest stop up ahead, a welcome sight in the darkness. They pulled off the highway and into the deserted parking lot, the only vehicle in sight. The rest stop loomed before them, an island of light in the sea of darkness that surrounded them. They stepped out of the car, stretching their legs and breathing in the cool night air. The rest stop seemed ordinary enough at first glance, a cluster of vending machines, picnic tables, and a row of dimly lit restrooms. But as they explored further, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the distant sound of crickets chirping in the night. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and sway in the darkness. A chill ran down their spines as they realized they were not alone. They hurried back to the safety of their car, the sense of unease growing with each passing moment. But as they prepared to leave, they noticed something strange, a figure standing at the edge of the parking lot, watching them with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled with the keys, desperately trying to start the engine and escape the sinister presence that lurked outside. But no matter how hard they tried, the car refused to budge, as if held in place by some unseen force. The figure drew closer, its features shrouded in shadow, until it was mere inches away from the car. And then, with a suddenness that left them breathless, it vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but an icy chill that hung in the night air. Terrified and shaken, they finally managed to start the car and speed away from the haunted rest stop, leaving behind the darkness and the dread that had threatened to consume them. But as they drove into the night, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something beyond their understanding, a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred and the spirits of the past lingered on. And so they continued their journey into the unknown, haunted by the memory of the haunted rest stop and the chilling encounter that had forever changed them.